day everybody, I'm Gill Blanchard, professional family historian and house historian. I'm going to be talking today on using wills and administrations in family history. We'll be looking at where to go, where to find probate records both before and after 1858, which is when the national system for registering probate records came into force, and where to find them nationally, locally and online. I love using probate records in research, but they are a source that many people don't bother to use, often by making assumptions that their ancestors won't be mentioned in a will. And while it's true that not many there's only a small percentage of people that left wills or for whom administrations were granted for the administering of their goods and chattels and any property they might have. For everybody that left a will and for every administration granted, there is at least one other person named in it. And that might be someone connected with you. And it's not just relatives. It could be servants, apprenticeships. It could be bequests to local charities. It might also give you indications about their religious leanings or attitudes or even their political leanings as well. You can find out about friendships, who inherited what, secrets and scandals. Find out about what they owned, if they owned anything. And as already mentioned, you might also find out more about the other local issues, putting things into context. So, for example, what charities they left money to can give you some idea about their interests and what else was going on locally. And it is very common to see long-standing servants and apprentices included in probate records. And the examples, just to give you a little taster before we take a closer look, the examples on the screen are 3 wills dating from 1849 at the top, 1454 at the bottom on the left, and 1880 on the right. And these come from a mixture of local and national archives and online digitised copies. Before we take a closer look, it's important to be aware of how the system has changed over time. And I'll be going backwards in time because that's always a good place to start. The first thing to remember is that the system became much simpler once we get to 11th of January 1858. Before that, there were around 250 church courts responsible for probate matters, and probate was primarily the responsibility of the church. And when we talk about church today, we're talking about the Anglican Church, the Church of England in England and Wales, and obviously pre-Reformation, there was no Anglican Church, but when we talk about the church today, that's what we mean. And the earliest records can go back to the 1200s, although most date from the 13 and 1400s onwards. So they are one of the main sources for going back before parish registers came into force in the 1500s, and also can help fill in gaps. There was quite a complex hierarchy of church courts, and the main thing to consider is to find out what that church hierarchy meant in the areas you're interested in, because the church jurisdictions don't correspond with parish jurisdictions necessarily, or with county jurisdictions, and it can go up from the lowest level of the church court, from a deanery, up through to the bishop's court, which is known as a consistory court at a local level, and then up to the highest level, which are the prerogative courts. The criteria on where probate was granted, there were various rules about it, and it was based on where people had property. So if you had land or property in more than one jurisdiction or more than one county, then your will should have been proved in a higher court. But people did not stick to the rules. So whenever I'm looking for probate records, I check all the courts. I don't make any assumptions. The local church court records are mostly held at county record offices. And the higher church court records, the Prerogative Court of Canterbury, which is the highest court for England and Wales, had jurisdiction over the whole country and date from 1384. They're held at the National Archives. And then you've got a Prerogative Court of York, which covers parts of the north of England. There were also some changes during the English Civil War period, because the bishops were abolished for part of that time, and various things made probate, or the powers were taken away from the church courts. But those records are still later filed among the church court records, and lots of those are held at the National Archives, but you sometimes get copies in local probate records collections as well. And the example I've put here on the left is a Prerogative Court of Canterbury will, PCC for short, from 1842, which can be downloaded and accessed via the genealogist website or via Ancestry or directly from the National Archives. And this is a will of John Harvey of Thorpe Lodge in Norfolk. Thorpe St Andrew is now part of the city of Norwich, but was a separate parish at that time. And the one on the right is a after 1858 will, after the system changed, and this is a local copy held in a county record office from 1866 for a William Crisp of Sedgeford in Norfolk. There's quite a few Norfolk examples in here because that's where I live, but not solely. I'll be coming on to this a little bit more about how to find them as we go through the talk, but the most major change occurred in 1858 when a national civil system came into force, when the powers to grant probate were taken away from the church. The English and Welsh records were then, copies would be made, so whenever there were district registries set up around the country and a will or administration could be granted either at a district registry or at the principal probate registry, which had overall jurisdiction, and indexes were created from those. These days, most people look for those online and can order them directly online, but the index is called the National Probate Calendar because it's more than just an index. I'll come back to that again in a moment. And that is a list of all wills and administrations available from around the country. And it's still available on film up to at least the 1960s in many record offices and local history libraries, but it's also available online up to around the 1990s now. Via Ancestry, but up to within the last 6 months at the Principal Probate Registry's own website. But because there were district registries, you will also find local copies held in local record offices. Many of those go up to the 1920s with their own indexes, but you do need to check those local indexes for those references. So I'll come back to that again in a moment.
We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. To watch the extended uninterrupted version, go to familyhistory.tv, link in the description. You will also find a host of talks from other experts on a variety of subjects. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified when these videos become available.